MLS had its first season all the way back in 1996, which is almost 30 years ago. Ever since, it has experienced tremendous growth in terms of attendance, facilities, viewers, quality of play, essentially everything. It hasn't been perfect, but everything I just said is not debatable. It's grown tremendously. They even brought in Messi recently. Despite all of that, MLS is still rejected by a good amount of soccer fans in America. It's currently the third most popular soccer league in the United States, behind the English Premier League and Liga MX from Mexico. Now sure, the Premier League is also very popular in Brazil, for example, but the domestic league there is still number one. The same way La Liga is very popular in Mexico, but it ain't beating Liga MX in Mexico. So why do Americans reject Major League Soccer, their number one domestic soccer league? Is it due to lack of promotion relegation, poor community outreach, or is it because the league feels plastic or corporate? I don't know, maybe it's just a matter of time. Who knows? Well, today we're going to be discussing this or debating this with Alexi Lalas. Hello. If you're new here, I'm Filippo and welcome to Tactical Manager TV. And today we have part one of our two-part interview with Alexi himself. And it's the first time that Alexi Lalas comes to Tactical Manager TV, so he is finally losing his Tactical Manager virginity. That just sounds wrong. I take it back. I take that back. For part one, which is today, we're going to be talking about why a good portion of soccer fans in America reject MLS, along with their youth development, culture, and much more. What they do right, what they do wrong. Now, for part two, which will come out after this episode, we're going to dive into the U.S. men's national team's current generation. And listen, I won't really dive into promotion relegation with Alexi in this episode. I've done way too many Pro Rel episodes, and we're going to do more in the future. I even brought in people I disagreed with, and you all know my stance. I am for promotion and relegation. However, if this video does well and it gets, let's say, over 750 likes, we will invite Alexi once again to specifically talk about Pro Rel. Sounds fair? Now sit back, relax, open up a bottle of whiskey, but cheap whiskey, because the economy ain't doing well these days, so you gotta get the cheap whiskey. They also all taste the same anyway. And don't forget to smash the like button, because as I said, we do need to hit over 750 for us to bring Alexi Lalas back. And this video is brought to you by So Rare, but more on that later. Roll the intro. Okay, everyone. Special guest here at the channel. Depending on who you are, some love him, some hate him. And overall, what I'll say, Alexi, is you're probably among the biggest guests I've brought here in terms of like people being excited, anxious, or angry that I'm bringing you in.
Well, over the years, I've found that I elicit different types of responses from different types of people. As you said, it runs the spectrum, good, bad, ugly, love, hate, all those different type of words. But, I'm in the entertainment business. I recognize that people are sitting at home, when we're on television, and this is just another form of television, with a remote control or a mouse pad or, a mouse or a pad or whatever, and they can go to a million other channels. And so I want to make sure that I keep them entertained and keep them informed in the things that I'm doing. And in doing so, giving my opinion. As you know, some people are going to like it and some people aren't. But I just want them to stay and watch. And, one of the reasons why I, wanted to come on with you when you invited me, and thank you for inviting me, is our soccer world is changing in terms of what the media landscape is and who the voices are out there. And you could say that it's fragmented, but the reality is that whether it's you or anybody else out there, and you can call it new media, whatever you want to call it out there, there are a lot of voices and a lot of interesting voices. And you can agree or disagree, but I think at least we have to agree that they are interesting, and yours is one of them.
I call my side the good guys. That's what I call them.
There's good people all over, and bad people for that matter, in everything.
No, but yeah, entirely agree. And then we had an episode at Will's channel, MLS Moves, And I think what's interesting too about bringing you, and we're going to get to the episode soon so we don't start mumbling for too long, it's that very often I bring guests and they're not open to, besides I think Herc, they're not very often open to pushing back on something that I say. And I hope today that we can both push back in a respectful way as we did on the other episode, where if you disagree, you actually put your opinion there, whether it's a terrible opinion or a great opinion, at least you put it out there. um, I think it's much more fun when it's a discussion rather than an interview. And I want to do something similar with you today, that what I do with like Herc Gomez, which he'll push back on something. Maybe me and Herc agree a bit more in a few things and me and you disagree more. So that might make it a bit more entertaining. But why don't we dive into it? The first one being MLS.
Let's do it.
Hey, it's taller and better looking Tom Cruise interrupting this video for a second. So I gotta pay rent, so rent's not late. We're gonna put now a quick word from the sponsor of this video, SoRare. We'll be back in 60 seconds, or maybe a little bit more than 60. Do you collect sports cards? Do you play fantasy sports? Yes, no, maybe? If you said yes to any of that, I got something for you. And if you said no, you might still want to stick around. Tactical Manager TV is partnering up with SoRare with a special offer. The link will be in the description. In SoRare, you can collect your own virtual cards of your favorite players. And then you may be asking, why would I want to collect virtual cards? Well, you can line them up on 5-a-side games every single week. And if your players perform in real life, you can win actual money, signed jerseys, game tickets, or even more cards to improve your own club. And you can also get unique experiences like a friend of the channel, Fiago, that got to meet Zinedine Zidane. You know what's also cool? They also have the NBA and Major League Baseball. I'm mainly gonna just stick to soccer, but you do you. What I really like about SoRare before we even partnered with them is that they're unlike other fantasy games where you have to pay per play. In SoRare, you pay to get the players you want permanently as cards. And then you can play multiple times using those same cards, at least until the player retires, win rewards if your players perform in real life. You can also buy undervalued player cards for cheap, then hold, use them in the future when they improve or develop, and then you can even sell that card when its value goes up for better ones. Or just keep the money yourself. And if you use the link in the description of this video, you will get $50 in credit after buying your first 5 cards through auctions or instant buy at any prices. Play with responsibility. All right, enjoy. That's gonna be a fun one. So let's start with MLS. And this episode will be pretty much all MLS, and then we'll go to part 2. I've always wondered one thing, and I've heard you talk about it, I've talked about it, and I want to ask you first a yes or no question, and then I want you to dive into your actual thoughts. 1, would you agree that most Americans, or I'll change it, American soccer fans, a good portion of them, they reject MLS? Would that be a yes or a no? A good portion.
I mean, reject is, subjective. MLS's problem isn't that there aren't soccer fans in America. It's that there are not enough MLS fans. So that's the way that I would answer that question. If you want a yes or no, I think in general, just if you look at the numbers, okay, fine. Because anytime anybody asks for a yes/no answer, it's kind of a gotcha question. But I will give you
I
a
didn't
yes,
get you
no
on
answer.
anything yet.
I will give you a yes/no answer. Yes, there you go.
Yeah, I know, and I agree with that. And I don't think it's actually a controversial question. You said it. The numbers prove it right now. Like Liga MX probably is like around number 1 right now. A lot of it has to do with obviously like just like Mexican culture within the US. That's probably the biggest thing. It's not like Liga MX got the marketing right in the United States. That's not really what happened. It's just there was migration, and then the dad is a big Liga MX fan. That goes on to the son, and it just keeps going. It's just the culture. Premier League actually got the marketing right. That one is the marketing and quality, I would say, too, obviously. The richest soccer league in the world, not the richest sports league in the world. Now, so I'll pivot that question to why do you think that they okay, we'll change the term reject. Why do a lot of American soccer fans or soccer fans go to other leagues? Because people say, for example, I'm going to even maybe help you with your response here. Very often people say it's the quality of play. And I don't entirely agree with that. 1, MLS is not unwatchable. 2, you go to countries like, for example, let's say Colombia. The Colombian league, in terms of quality of play, and I watch the Libertadores, it's not a higher level than MLS. But domestically, it's the most watched league, right? So why or what can MLS do to change that? And I know you've put a lot of thought into this because you've talked about it before.
Okay, so the reason why is that it's logical. All right. Obviously, the unique aspects of the United States and our history when it comes to sports, all of our other sports, soccer not being king, and the way that we look at soccer internally and domestically. I talk about the insecurity and the inferiority complex that we have, and it's kind of to be expected because the rest of the world, this has always been the game for the rest of the world. And from a men's perspective, we've never been the best. And therefore, when we try to get involved, in this case with MLS, but it could be USL or it could be even the NASL back in the day, it's done through that lens of, well, the rest of the world is further along and the rest of the world is better. Now, to your point, that is oftentimes perception. The reality might be very, very different, but the perception is important. And also, to be fair, that's changed over the now, let's say, 30 years that MLS has been around, and even further if you look back in time. But this is the reality of the situation. This is the challenge for MLS, whether you're Don Garber as a commissioner or any of the teams that you have out there. I will say, being an older guy, the progress that we have made, the evolution of this sport, both on and off the field, is unprecedented when you put it up against any other country and culture and league in the world. So that makes me positive about where we're going. But I'm also American, and I want the best. And I get the compare and contrast that inevitably is going to happen with the rest of the world. And if you already come from a place where you think that it's better in terms of the play on the field, it's better in terms of the environment and the culture, then it's going to be very difficult to convince you otherwise, because I will raise my hand. We do things a little bit differently here in the US. I don't think that's necessarily a problem, but in that inevitable compare and contrast where you're trying to get credibility, sometimes that's a problem if it doesn't live up to what they grew up watching. When I say they, I mean soccer fans and just sports fans in general who have just kind of taste tested the game over the years.
I also wanted to, just something I randomly thought about. In the United States, when we talk about, for example, MLS having a very similar business model from like NFL, NBA, I think one of the big differences is NBA and NFL, all the way down to like grassroots or the youth level, it is very community driven in the sense that when you talk about like the people very much talk about the experience of soccer outside of America where it's community driven, that would be more of like our college sports where you feel much more the community, right?
Mm-hmm.
The students and even people surrounding it that actually live there. It's a more like, I don't want, well, I'll use this word, like a more passionate fan base might be it. It's just a different experience from when you go watch NFL or NBA live. Not that I've gone to many NFL games. I have gone to a lot of NBA games, but I've gone to a lot of college basketball games, and it's a completely different environment.
Yeah, but just
Um,
because it's a different environment doesn't mean that it's any more or less passionate. I mean, this purity test of passion that American fans often do, it drives me a little bit crazy. Yes, there are differences, and yes, the experience can be different. But if you are a fan of the Portland Timbers or something like that, why is just because your experience might be a little different than somewhere around the world, doesn't mean that you're any less passionate about the game. Just because there is a business aspect that is inherent in all leagues, but maybe is much more at the forefront when it comes to Major League Soccer, doesn't mean that it's any less passionate or any less vital in terms of the community. So I think there would be people, and I would do this to you, is push back and say that whether it's an MLS team or an NWSL team or a USL team, I think that they are actually bending over backwards to be part of the community with the recognition and the respect that this is still a business, and they understand that, but maybe much more so because they've had to fight for every little piece of space, literally at times in their communities. I think that are much more communal than you're giving them credit for.
but then it goes back to culture within the clubs. When you talk about MLS, it's like talking about NBA and talking about NFL. I don't think it has the cultural impact of a small community building a club, growing it, which is more or less what I talk about when I talk about like college. Because I even had this discussion with Tab, for example. I talked to Tab your former
Sure.
teammate for the '94 World Cup. We're talking about youth development in the U.S. and I wouldn't say I pushed back because he didn't agree. He thought that, yeah, I mean, he didn't want to talk too much about youth development in MLS because he said, I'm not really there, so I can't tell you what's doing right or wrong. And I told him, I don't think MLS's youth development by any means is bad. I don't think it's bad. I think they do what they can do. I think the issue is MLS doesn't tackle one thing, that is, we don't have the soccer culture that these other countries have, which is fine. It's what our country is. I don't think there's an issue there. But there are ways to tackle that. These other countries, the kids are playing soccer when they're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In America, a lot of the kids, they'll start when they're 7, 8. They'll have played 5 different sports, right? It's a little bit different. While you go to Latin America, the kid's kicking a soccer ball as soon as he can walk. And that plays a big role because when he gets to the academy, the technical floor and the technical development of these kids is much higher. I'm not saying for us to put little kids in academies. You don't do that to 3, 4, 5-year-olds. They have to just play and have fun. But the community outreach is something that can be done to slowly get it integrated within that specific community, that city. Now, when you talk about football, I know it's a bit of a different sport, football, than soccer in terms of technical development. It's a completely different approach, completely different development. Basketball, on the other hand, there's a lot of technical development involved with it. And I mean, we have the culture of street basketball that we play a lot. Pickup basketball in the United States is huge, right? I suck at basketball and I used to play pickup basketball all the time here. No matter how bad I am and how short I am, I was playing it.
Sure.
So, but you don't see that with soccer in the US, besides some very like isolated groups and communities. It's very fragmented. Now, if you have that at the college level or you have that even at a younger level, that would fix itself. And the reason I say all this is because even back in college, if I could, I'd be playing pickup soccer all the time. But the only thing I could find is pickup basketball. That's what I could find. And I liked it. I played it, but you don't find it at the younger level. The culture is not there. And I think what MLS gets wrong in that sense is they don't have that, unfortunately, right? They don't have that privilege that basketball, football, and I guess even baseball has in the United States of America. They don't have that privilege. So they have to do something different to be able to become that with the same business model. That's the overall point. Because in terms of spending money, MLS is spending money for whatever people want to say. If you look at the ignore the salary cap for a second. If you look at the overall expenditure of MLS, it's up there, man. It's way ahead of many big leagues in the world. And I mean, it's also the US, which is an attractive market where a lot of people want to move in here. And and again, not again trying to label different passions of different countries. The pressure in MLS from a fan base is different from like other countries where the fans take it a bit too far very often. But I'm not like labeling who's more passionate or less passionate, but it is different from a cultural standpoint. And I think it would change. I told you, I think, was it at MLS Moves that I told you that um, I saw a Red Bull fan lose the MLS Cup final and post a picture like very happy to be there after the game, right? And it's a very different way of my approach from it because I even said that, I mean, I'll be proud if the US made it to the World Cup. I'll be hyped. But the moment they lost, I'll kind of be devastated for that day. For that day. After that, we're like, oh my God, this was crazy and super proud of this country. But that moment, that day, I wouldn't be able to talk. I would be, if you make it to that final, you have a chance of winning. But anyhow, did it make sense what I said? Because I talked
Yeah. A couple of things. I'd like to get maybe here in a couple of minutes we can get back to the spending of Major League Soccer because I think that's really interesting. And the reality of there's a lot of billionaires that are involved in Major League Soccer. But when it comes to the development, you kind of laid out what needs to be done, and I've heard this now for decades from people saying, well, you gotta start them early and you just give them a ball when they're 3 and they're constantly doing that. And so there have now been multiple generations of soccer people in the United States, like yourself in terms of the way that they think about how to raise a soccer player, if you will. Mm-hmm. And if what you say is true, and it sounds pretty easy in terms of giving them a ball at a very young age and letting them play and letting them do what they want, and obviously not getting too in the weeds when it comes to tactics and all that kind of stuff. And if what you say is true, then people will have done that, and those players would have manifested. And not only that, but wouldn't they be so much better than the other players that we have. Because if the majority of people aren't doing that and are waiting much later to begin playing soccer or to do the things that we're talking about here, wouldn't that person have an incredible advantage? And yet we don't see that actually happening. Yeah, I will absolutely agree to you that no matter what, the culture and the history that we have is going to be different. And we could be the best soccer playing nation in the world, and it's still going to be uniquely American given our history. And that's an okay thing. We shouldn't be scared of doing that. But we also have to recognize that there are some realities to the society that we have created, the culture we have created, and like I said, the history that we have when it comes to our game. I guarantee you that there are people that maybe even are watching or listening to this that have done exactly what you said in terms of giving that ball to that 3-year-old and letting them just kick and have fun and do whatever. So why haven't those players matriculated up to
But that's
great,
not what
incredible
I
players?
said. Wait, let me actually just correct what I meant. I don't think you just give the ball. I was talking about MLS clubs or MLS teams in this case influencing their own cities, right? Because they're specific to their cities. What do I mean by that? And I'll give you actually real life examples here from Orlando. That way will help you. When Orlando City opened their first soccer school, I was the head coach there. I was there. It was right before the pandemic. Then we had a bit of a pause, and then we came back a couple months. We came back, and I've always talked about how these kids, if you go to other countries, they idolize a player and they want to copy that player, right? They'll see Ronaldinho do a rainbow flick, then that kid just keeps trying that. And
Sure.
most of them don't get it, but some of them get it. And that's how it goes. And they wear the jersey. You know how it is. They need an inspiration. And I've always talked about this in the Orlando City Soccer School. I've always talked about, hey, why doesn't Orlando City get one player to come here every month? One player, just one, to come here for 1 hour every month so the kids can see a professional player. They can go to the stadium when they go watch the game, and they like little things like that to influence the kids to fall in love with that specific team and want to replicate whatever players they have and idolize it. The other thing I do is I have an after school soccer company here in Orlando. I have about, it oscillates between 280 to 300 and something kids. So let's say 300 kids. Every year when I start the school year, I go to all the schools, and each school that I go, I try to like talk about, hey, go, what's the local team? The Rowdies are too far. So we have Orlando City. Who's going to a game? I'm telling you, Alexi, out of the 300 kids, 10 to 30, I'll put like something like 30 kids know what Orlando City is. And these are kids playing soccer. They're
Mhm.
young. They're young. They're between ages of 6 to 11, but you would expect them to at least know the only local club we really have in Orlando, and they don't. So, I mean, and I'm talking about it to them again, and I understand that American culture is different from these other countries, but these teams have to do. And don't get me wrong, I'm talking about Orlando specifically.
Sure.
I know Seattle does a great job. LA, I was there, and I mean, LA is just a massive city in general, but I did see LAFC and Galaxy in that city when I was there. I saw it. It was only 2 days, but I saw it. But there are teams like New York, in my opinion. I lived in New York. I don't think they do a good job. Orlando City, I've seen it firsthand. They do not do a good job with that. Um, Miami, to a certain extent, I don't think they do a good job outside of marketing. You know who. So what I'm saying is that like these little things don't pay dividends now. They pay later. And that's how you change the culture. No, it's not going to work if you just go there and give a kid a soccer ball. That's not what I meant. I know some people say that, but it's not what I meant. And these institutions need to do that job. And obviously, us, we try to talk to parents and try to educate people whatever way we can. But our influence is much smaller than what an Orlando City has within its community, or they could have within their
Yeah.
community. That's what I meant. Not just give a ball and, hey, kiddo, go kick it and you'll figure it out. It's not how it
Sure.
works.
I mean, obviously, the stories that you are talking about obviously are personal and anecdotal in terms of what you have experienced. I guarantee that if I were to go to Orlando City and talk to the people that work there, they would have a list of things that they have done and appearances that their players have had, and they would go this. It's never enough. We all understand that, and this gets back to, they have obviously a certain budget, and they have to work within that budget. And they're also, unlike the rest of the world, they are competing against the other sports and the other entertainment in that city or within that region. This is not to excuse them because now, like we said, we're going to 30 years. And so a young soccer player in an MLS market, it's no excuse that they should not, at the very least, know about the team, let alone to have been touched in some way. And whether that's the merchandise, whether that's actually going to a game, whether that's meeting a player, whether that's seeing it on television, that obviously has to have happened at some point. And we all understand it may or may not take, but you want to grow a generation, whether they are avid soccer fans or not, that at least have that as part of their palette of not just sports, but entertainment in their city. And if you don't have that, then that's a problem. Now, you mentioned Los Angeles. I'm here in Los Angeles. Obviously, it's a vast, vast market. It's while it's admirable, it's next to impossible to cover all of that in any type of way. I do think that if you were go to the greater Miami area and ask people what Inter Miami is, that they would have an idea of what Inter Miami is. And yes, the Messi thing helped. By the way, even something as simple as the aesthetic, the pink of that jersey has helped in terms of spreading the brand out there. And these are things that men and women now for a long time have thought about. How do you cut through the clutter? How do you make yourself distinctive in these markets that we have? And it's easy, I've been on the inside. It's easy from the outside to look at it and say, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. The reality when you are actually sitting day in, day out and pushing that boulder up the hill is very, very different. So this is a little bit of me defending the men and women that each and every day go out and do that hard work. But it's also me saying that it absolutely can and should be better. And this probably gets into the money that they have, and at least my desire for MLS to do big, bold things. As proud as I am after 30 years of what we have created when it comes to MLS, to your point, it can be so much more. And I want it to be so much more. And that's just me spending other people's money and telling people how to do their job. But I do want something big and bold to happen. Obviously, World Cup's coming in in a year and a half. This is the perfect time to do some big, bold things that will send that message out. And hopefully from top to bottom, whether you're 3 years old or whether you're 60 or 70 years old, it will be a seed that is planted.
Yeah, the thing too with everything I said, Orlando City's first season was what, 2016, I think, when we had Kaká.
That sounds about right?
Yeah, I remember that because I actually went to a lot of games of when Kaká was here at Camping World Stadium at the time, the bigger one, right?
I remember that, yeah.
My dad. Yeah, we used to go to those games a lot when Kaká was here, even though Orlando was really bad at that time. Now it's a better team. But the thing is, everything I said, whether it was attempted, whether they have a list of what they tried, it doesn't matter because these are things that you keep doing for the long run. You haven't had enough time to see the effects of a cultural impact within your community in 7 to 8 years with a pandemic in between that definitely made us lose a full year there. So even less. So it's something that you keep doing and you don't really see the dividend. It doesn't pay dividends until a generation, right? We're talking about a generation. So it can be like 10 to 15 years. So whether they have a list or not, it doesn't even matter to me. You have to keep doing it. And then sure, if you come up to me, look, we tried this for 20 years and there's no impact. You're like, okay, I was 100% wrong and I apologize for that. But you can't come to me and say it didn't work if you tried it for 5 years on something that is a long-term project. It's not a 2-3 years. Like you're not going to see a difference in 2 to 3 years. It takes 1 or 2 generations. Let me ask you a question here. I asked this to Tab as well. You go back to the 2002 USMNT team. I'm not going to go to like 94, 98. 94, I couldn't even watch it. In 98, I was too young. 2002, I have lapses of memories. I was still a young kid, but obviously we see all the highlights. We know what happened in that World Cup and that we watched it from start to finish. And then we get the U.S. men's national team now. If I remove all the non-MLS developed players from the current generation, it would be Christian Pulisic, Balogun, Musa, Dest, A-Rob, Johnny Tillman, Carter Vickers, I guess we can include him in the list, and a few others, right? Non-MLS developed. And we put that national team. Are we better than what we were 20 years ago, in your opinion?
I mean, look, if you take what is potentially going to be the greatest American male soccer player out of the equation, obviously that's a problem in terms of the compare and contrast. So I would agree. I would agree with Tab. If you perform that exercise, yeah, it starts to look, pretty weak. And you could absolutely make arguments for those teams in the past. I will say that those teams in the past, including 2002, in this this lament, if you will, from many about MLS and MLS players and the seeming glee that people sometimes take on crapping on MLS and MLS players. If you look at that 2002 team, the stars were MLS players, and not just the Landon Donovans and DeMarcus Beasley, who kind of broke on the scene at the time, but you look at everybody from Pablo Mastroianni to Eddie Pope, and so the quality of MLS player relative to the national team, I think, was markedly higher. And I think we are at a point right now where a lot of the MLS players that are American and U.S. men's national team eligible right now are of lesser quality, and there's fewer of them. And maybe that's a logical type of progression as the pathways have opened up to go over to Europe, and the pressure individually and I guess collectively as a soccer playing nation to push players to go to Europe. And look, if you want to go to Europe as a soccer player, an American soccer player, there are flights leaving every hour on the hour from LAX to JFK and everywhere in between. But if you actually want to go to a place where, it's the right money, it's good for you in the other 22 and a half hours that you're not playing the game, you can adapt to the culture and the language and the food and the, you and maybe your wife, your partner, whatever it ends up being, is able to adapt. That's a whole nother kettle of fish. And so in our zest and our zeal to produce better American soccer players, I think we have forced many of them to always look overseas. And that's not necessarily always the right answer, but to can bring it all the way back around in terms of what Tab is saying. Absolutely. I think you can make the argument that, the quality that we have had in the past has been as good, if not better, in certain instances than what we have right now. And is that a problem? I guess so, because you want to have progression and getting better and better and better. We all know that's not always linear in terms of progression, but 30 plus years on from the 1994 World Cup, I think if you would ask me way back before you were born, back in the 1900s when I was running around, if this is what I would want, in many ways, I would be astounded by how far we've come, but there would be a part of me that says I would have hoped that individually, when we talk about these players, that they would be much further along.
Yeah, I think I misspoke on one thing. Tab didn't talk about the 2002 team. When I asked him this question, I said, if we remove the non-MLS developed players right now, he said that team, the team of non-MLS players, you'd have to go back all the way to 1990 to get a worse team. He even said that, and I don't want to speak for him because the episode's not even out. I'm pretty sure he even said that the 1994 team was better than the current team without the players developed abroad. The ones I removed, the Pulisic, Balogun, like those guys. That's what he said. I mean, you played for that team.
Yep.
You might have some thoughts on that as well.
It was a unique group of players. It was also a unique time. And look, I think all of us ex-pros, ex-players, we're always going to, I don't even know if the kids say stand anymore, but we're going to stand for our generation and our team. And we were so much harder, and, we're going to grumpy old man the thing. And I'm not saying that that's what Tab's doing or I'm doing for that matter, but absolutely, I would put our team up against any national team that we have. And just because you play in Europe, just because you play in, these leagues and some of these big teams, I'm happy and I'm proud that we have that, because I think it helps with credibility, but it doesn't necessarily translate to the national team in terms of being better and ultimately getting to that goal when it comes to the men's side of winning a World Cup.
I think to close even this episode on MLS, I do think everything we talked about, MLS has failed the U.S. men's national team in terms of development. That's my conclusion at the end of the day with all of this, because MLS has grown. That is factual. It's not debatable. MLS's facilities are way better than they were 20 years ago. That's factual. It's not debatable. The league is more popular than 20, 30 years ago. Again, all of that is factual. But when we talk about the U.S. men's national team, and MLS is the first division of soccer in the U.S. with the best players, the best youth players, the best facilities, development is going to mainly come from them. People like MLS or not, that's where the most of the American, not most, I'd say pretty much all the American players developed in the US, they're going to have to go through MLS. With maybe a few rare exceptions, like maybe a Christian Pulisic, but that's like one in
Sure.
23, 26 players, or hundreds of players, actually. And the fact that we can't, after 20 years of an exponential growth of MLS, not say that, no, the team might not be too much better, but it is about the same if you remove the players developed abroad. I think that's a failure of MLS in terms of the national team. And again, you might say it doesn't matter. MLS has to improve their business and they have to focus on their profits, money, and I mean the franchise fees speak for themselves. And I can shut up. They're doing that, but at the end of the day, we go back to what we talked about in the beginning of this video. If the U.S. men's national team is successful, right? Because that's usually how a lot of the soccer fans come into become like Americans become. Because you talk to these Americans that become soccer fans later in their life, they always have that one moment, right? Landon Donovan scoring against Algeria, that Hollywood-like goal just drew them into the sports. I get comments in my video. A lot of people are like, I became a soccer fan in the 1994 World Cup, right? They have specific moments, and it's usually the national team. And then from there, they're like, okay, what's my local league or my local team or what's going on? Some go to the Premier League, some go to Major League Soccer. Having a successful U.S. men's national team, I do think will have a huge impact in MLS in a
Sure.
positive way, in them developing these stars, and these stars not necessarily being in the league, but coming out of the league, whether they go to Milan or Manchester United or Man City, whatever. I'll give you an example. If Kevin Sullivan becomes what they're projecting that he'll become, I don't like a lot of the marketing they're doing around the kid, but the kid's clearly good. If he becomes anywhere near that, I think that is huge for MLS. It's an MLS player that's going to Europe and doing well, and that has major implications for the league and people to follow, because they're going to follow who's the next big prospect, who's the next Christian Pulisic. We got to follow the league. I talk a lot to U.S. men's national team fans, and that's one thing they follow the league for: American prospects like Diego Luna right now. And I think they failed when that so far. Can they still fix it? Of course. And they probably know they can make a lot of
How
money
have
out
they
of this.
failed? Hold on. I completely disagree with you in terms of that they failed. I just listed off in 2002, way back when the league was only 5, 6, 7 years old, was producing players that played on the national team. And even if you just look at this last World Cup, obviously Matt Turner came out of
How many
MLS.
players in 94 were from MLS?
None, because MLS didn't exist.
There you go. And you guys made it out of the group.
Right. Oh, but what does that have to do with anything?
My point
MLS
is,
has provided more opportunity for American soccer players than anything that has ever been implemented in American soccer history. The pathways, the opportunity, the from a very young age, the schooling and the coaching and the facilities, and like I said, the opportunities to enabling them to go over.
my point. That's my point. They've offered all of that, and we're not seeing that drastic improvement with the drastic investment. There's a gap because your team, you just said it, your team did not have what MLS had. Yet you guys pretty much accomplished what everyone else did. And again, I don't really believe in luck. I don't think you guys accomplished it because of luck. So I mean, if we could develop players like your generation in 94 without MLS, with MLS, you should be talking right now like this. You should be going, this generation right now, 30 years of MLS, they would destroy us. We would win 2 out of 10, but they wouldn't. We're even thinking they could lose if we removed the developed abroad. And I'm agreeing with you and Tab on that sense that your team can easily compete with this team if you remove the Pulisic, the Balogun, all that. I think they could.
Okay. All right. So give me an example of a national team whose current generation people would say, oh, they would destroy the generation of 20 years ago. There's very few of them that I would think. England's not going to do something like that. Japan's going to do that. I guarantee you that I can get old Japanese players, and they will sit here and say, nah, they don't have the grit. They don't have the fortitude.
But I'm agreeing with you.
We would beat their ass. I guarantee you.
But I'm agreeing with you about the 90s and the 2002 team. And I'm not.
But what I'm saying is that it's like the way of the world. That's kind of how it works. You think the Argentinian teams of yore are looking at this Argentinian team with Messi and say, oh, they would destroy us. And they say, no, yeah, we'd have to deal with Messi and he's a great player and all that kind of stuff, but we deal with it. It just kind of, it's what happens. But I think you're discrediting Major League Soccer, and I don't think that you are giving Major League Soccer enough credit for the good that has happened when it comes to soccer. Has it translated into the U.S. men's national team winning a World Cup? No. But that doesn't mean that you negate all of the good that has happened, all of the opportunities, all the progression, all of the like I said, the resources and the facilities that have gone into creating more American soccer players who have had more opportunity. Do you realize that myself and Kobe Jones, I know I'm making your point a little bit right here. When we stepped on the field in 1994, we had never even been on the books of a club team. Okay.
Actually,
that's how Wild West it was. And yes, we went on and we figured it out and we were okay. I am so proud and so happy, and I don't begrudge any of them from the opportunities that they have. What we have established is so much better than in the past. And
but
yeah,
I agree
you can
with
say,
that.
whoa, they haven't taken advantage of it here and they didn't do this here. But I don't want to go back. I don't want to even come close to going back. I don't want to go 30 years back. I don't want to go 20 years back. I don't want to go 10 years. I don't want to go 5 years back because it's still so much better than it ever has been.
But I agree with that. I don't want to go back. I just want them to figure out how do you use all these resources that they have these days that they've built, MLS, and I give them credit for that. They built it. It doesn't matter if I agree with their business model or not. They've built a I guess, $billion business right there with MLS because a franchise is like 300, 400, one franchise, right? But at the end of the day, it's like, how do you translate that to real results? And the real results in World Cups haven't really changed much. Like I look, I have no issue with the U.S. getting players developed abroad. I've always advocated bringing in dual nationals if from abroad, right? Because Pepe is a dual national developed here, for example. In
Why
MLS.
are you blaming MLS though? Why are you blaming it? Why aren't you blaming Juventus or AC Milan or something like that? Because you just mentioned all of these other players are playing over in these other all these other places. But you would be the first one to scream bloody murder if Pochettino just said, you know what? Screw it. I'm taking all MLS players.
Oh, no, I'm not blaming MLS for that. What I'm saying is I would like for us to have a national team that is so good with the players developed here in America. It's not even about dual nationals because, like I said, Pepe is a dual national, but he's developed here. I want us to develop so many players that these players developed abroad, they only come here when they're freaking good enough to be that, and not whether or not we just need them because we don't even have a freaking goalkeeper these days, for crying out loud. It's just like a lot of like things that it just feels like in certain positions we have regressed, and the ones that we haven't regressed, it just feels like they're anomalies, like a Christian Pulisic, which is an anomaly. It's not really the norm. It's not a player. I mean, sure, it's not like every country is developing a Christian Pulisic, of course. That's not really the point. But I'm just saying the United States has more resources than, I mean, I would guess almost every country almost at this point. We also have the size. We have a sporting culture. And I understand that we're competing with other massive sports. We're not going to beat football here. And it doesn't feel like MLS outside, besides everything MLS has done good, which is, you're right, the investment, the facilities, everything has improved. And I talked about this. It doesn't feel like it has translated to the national team at the same rate. Now, could I be?
By the way, well, just you mentioned Christian Pulisic. Just so you know, if Christian Pulisic had existed back in my day, there's a good chance that he would not be Christian Pulisic that we know about. All right, and that's because of the infrastructure and the culture, including to a huge degree what MLS has
he would be Alexi's accountant.
Huh? I'm just telling you. I'm just telling you the identification process that we have. The players that aren't slipping through the cracks as they did back in the day. And even though Christian Pulisic didn't play in MLS, he grew up and came to be from a younger age in that culture and in that ecosystem that was so much more advanced than anything that we have had in the past. And yes, he had his father with the connections and obviously a passport and all that kind of stuff. But he grew up in a very, very different time. And that time, whether you like it or not, was created by Major League Soccer in great part.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that I can't go and say that MLS is doing everything wrong. That's not even the point of what I said. But at the end of the day, we can't say that Pulisic was developed by MLS. My point is, I want
But he was
MLS.
developed by American soccer at a young age and
He's
from a young
definitely
age.
American soccer. Yes,
Yes.
he's definitely.
And I know
American.
he had stints over in Europe, and his family was moving around and all that kind of. By the way, lots of people did. I grew up playing in the dirt fields of Athens, Greece. A lot of people don't know that when I was very young. So yeah, everybody has different.
Sounds fun though.
Yeah, that's fun. That's a good deal. It's fun.
Yeah, it just seems like Pulisic's more of an anomaly though. Otherwise, we
Yes,
would have had.
yeah. Look,
Yeah.
I mean, we all know how good he is, but to say that he wasn't touched or influenced by American soccer, and that American soccer in great part through MLS, I just think that's not correct.
Okay, we're gonna end this MLS episode on this. There were more things I wanted to talk about this one, but I feel like the way we both talk a lot, we can go for 3 hours on one topic.
That's all right. This is
But anyhow, everyone, let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. This is just what me and Alexi think. Some things we agree, some things we disagree. I want to hear what you all have to say. Thank you for watching. Drop a like before you go. Have a great day. We'll see you guys on part 2.